Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of the My Car series from AMPro Engineering. What we have got here is something incredibly special. This is my second full function RC car of all time. This thing here came after my Nico Turbo Panther, which we'll be featuring soon on this channel. But whereas the Nico Turbo Panther is in fully restored condition, this one really isn't. Allow me to explain. In the late 80s, I had some RC cars already. These two were my technically first radio-controlled vehicles. I say that loosely because these are the dreaded forward and reverse and turn back versions of these cars. So this old Fiat Uno, I think I got this when I was very little when we were in Italy. It is made in Italy, which is kind of cool. And then I've got this Alfa Romeo Giulietta, which unfortunately hasn't had wheels since the late 80s. It's also made in Italy. Both of these will be featured on this channel very soon also, but basically you can kind of see what I had at the time. This was really all there was at a low enough price point for a lot of kids. When I did finally get my Turbo Panther, I absolutely adored it, and I still do to this day. But then one morning, I saw the commercial for the Tyco Bandit. Tyco was a marketing powerhouse. Now, they didn't really build anything. In fact, if you flip this over here, we can see that it says Tyco RC, made by Tyco in Singapore. So Tyco basically said, put our name on the mold, don't bother changing it here, and we are going to sell this thing like hotcakes, and they did. Boy, did they. I desperately had to have this vehicle. I remember going to school and hearing all my friends talk about the Tyco Bandit they had. The problem was that we couldn't afford a Bandit. I begged and begged and begged, and I was grateful for my turbo hopper, but I still wanted this little Nissan. So in 4th grade, this kid I used to know, Ben, who I knew had one of these, said, hey, my parents just bought me a new one. Do you want my old one? $10. That was not easy to get. Obviously begging my parents now for $10. They did give it to me, and I got this. It's difficult for me to express the condition of this vehicle. So this is an early Bandit. No, okay, it has a diff now. It didn't used to have a diff. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Early Bandits came in these two liveries, both absolutely fantastic. This is a 27 band, so I think it was this one. I could be wrong. The thing is, when I got the vehicle, the stickers had been peeled off. In some areas, you can still see where they were. Peeled off, and this thing was absolutely trashed. All the cracks right there, there's probably a couple more back here that you'd find on this body. That was not me. That was Ben. What this car did have was front suspension, which was cool. And you're probably thinking, well, don't most RC cars have front suspension? And yes, that is the case. But when we get to its brother, you'll see why that was surprising to me. What this car did not have, however, was rear suspension. I created this little bracket, which I think I have in a video, or maybe I have to make the video. The original design of these is horrible. It's just a little pressed plastic pin that's shoved into the side of the body, and then the shock snaps in, this exact shock right here. The issue is a hard impact will shear it right off. This is hard ABS plastic. They were broken. So this thing was driving around completely flat like this. In fact, you can see the wear right there. To remedy that, this eraser. What you did was jam this eraser right in that little gap right there where the front of the screwdriver is, right there. And I got to tell you, it worked. I mean, it got the back up in the air, and it gave it a little bit of suspension. It was fantastic. So this eraser would be used later on as well. So we'll see you again. The front arms, as you can see here, these are some AMPro units. There's a reason for that. Okay, both arms sheared off. The springs, amazingly, were still there. So again, it did have its front suspension. It had some weird rear suspension. One more problem. The body was taped together. This was a result of this bracket missing, this bracket missing. They're not cosmetic. This piece here is where you put your screw straight in through this upper plate, and this is where it threads in. So that actually holds the body down. But not only were these missing, they were missing for a reason. This is the cover for the PCB. So you'll put that on the PCB, 4 screws. The little LED will protrude through there. And there were 2 little bosses here that would mate with the body, and then you put the screw through this, the body, and then the threaded part would go into this roll bar. They're broken. On top of no rear suspension, broken shock mounts, this missing. The front bumper was also missing, okay? This is from a different car. This is from his brother. I had to tape the body onto the car. It was a disaster. A few things that we did to make this work was to like put the screws through here, and like I think what ended up happening was I think there was like a bracket that I glued on here. Either way, it was hokey and it was a mess, an absolute mess. So needless to say, I did my best driving it. It did run forward, forward, reverse, left, right. It all worked. It was functional. Really soon though, I heard the dreaded grind coming out of low gear in this gearbox, and it lost first gear. It just fell apart. Who knows how many times this was jumped, but I lost first gear. Shortly after, second went away also, and I was just devastated. I did have my Turbo Panther, which, believe me, got plenty of use, but the fact that this was dead was really a bummer. About a year later, after having gotten this vehicle, my buddy Ben again says, hey man, I'm going to get rid of my Tyco Bandit because I got something else. Cool, I want that one also. How much? $10. I go over there and I get his brother, which we'll see in the next video. His brother, however, did have these bumpers, front again and rear, and it had just this piece here, which again is this. This is printed, but I actually do have that part. I will talk more about the tailgate thing and this hook in the next video because they actually don't belong to this truck. But I wanted to give you a little rundown of this. Prior to this truck's transmission failing, I did paint it. What you are seeing here is a touch-up that I did later on. You see it close right there. These were all freehand. So I used black paint later on and some masking tape to clean up the poor lines, but this is 8-year-old me doing all this stuff. In fact, later on, a good friend of mine, Artie, who you've heard about in my videos earlier, he wrote this little Trinity text here on the rear because he loved those motors, and maybe putting Trinity there would make this faster. I have no idea. Maybe that's why the transmission broke, come to think of it. So definitely not a work of art, but it was what I had. Once I had gotten his brother, I started driving that one a lot more, and this thing was completely dead, so it just kind of sat there. Eventually it was thrown in a box. Eventually it was used for parts. And finally, for probably since 1990, this thing's just been a hunk of junk with the body. I'd always planned on using the body for some other project, and I don't know what happened, but I realized one day, I'm like, you know what? I just finished your brother. Why can't I put you back together? What turned out to be a very quick restoration, I did. I rebuilt the chassis. Chassis is original. Front bumper is original. This bumper here. I did replace that top plate that I showed you earlier that was broken with a, I had some parts cars, so pulled that off. Same with the shocks. These are off of a different vehicle. Made this bracket right there. This is an original Bandit part from his brother. That is printed. This is printed. I do have some original pieces. Again, old beat up ones from his brother, but that's about it. The transmission was replaced with also a parts one. It's not great, but it works. All the electronics have been replaced with modern electronics, and it runs wonderful. You can see that since I did put the new transmission in, you can see the old wheel, which was kind of a mess. Apparently, when I was little, I tried taking it off. One day, we're going to have to do a video on how to pull this transmission apart. The only reason I haven't done it right now is that there is no successful way to replace the gears. There are some replacement gears available, but not for all of them. So I want to do a diff version, but I digress. We'll focus on this for the time being. Needless to say, I ended up designing the front suspension arms, got the chassis all operational. Then when it came time to fixing the body, like I did with his brother, I decided, you know what? I have a lot of nice, fully restored, fully finished, all redone bodies for some of my RC cars. I think this one over here should be left alone. Obviously, it's not beautiful, but it has a story to tell, and its imperfection is why this thing, to me, is absolutely perfect. This is Bandit 1. In the next episode, we will have Bandit 2. Thank you all so much for watching. I wish I had a slot car track to put these on. And we'll see you next time.